These two cards look quite similar. They both draw you 2 cards and require you to sacrifice a creature, but they have some important timing differences that are worth understanding in this specific example. And after we've looked at the specific example, we'll expand out to a more general level. So in this video, we're going to talk about paying costs, spell resolutions, and when you can and cannot respond. By the end, you'll have a solid understanding of how they work on the stack and how you can identify this distinction in other cards. Let's talk about paying costs first. When you cast a spell, you announce it, lock choices, pay costs, and only then the spell is cast and put on the stack. No one can respond to the payment of costs required to put a spell on the stack. Let's look at Village Rites with a simple board state. You control Blood Artist and a 1/1 token. You want to cast Village Rites following the steps we just outlined. Here's how that looks. Announce Village Rites. It has an additional cost. Sacrifice a creature. You choose the token. Now you pay the additional cost and sacrifice the token immediately. No one can respond to that sacrifice because it's part of paying the spell's casting cost. The token dies, and you've now paid all of the costs to cast Village Rites. The spell is then put onto the stack. Now here is where we'll need to pay close attention. The game can't put triggers on the stack until priority is checked. And as we've noted, you can't respond to someone paying a cost. Or in other words, nobody has priority when you're paying the cost. Blood Artist has seen a creature die, and the next time that priority is checked is when the costs for Village Rites have been paid and the spell actually goes onto the stack. The takeaway is that Blood Artist's trigger will go onto the stack above the Village Rites. If multiple players have triggers because of a creature dying, then all of them will be put on the stack above the Village Rites in active player, non-active player order. See my video on AppNap for a full breakdown of how that works. Let's keep our board state the same and look at Reactor Raid. It uses the template You May Sacrifice. If you do, draw 2 cards. If you've seen my video on triggered abilities, then you know that the word may is a signpost word here. It's telling you when the sacrifice happens. Unlike Village Rites, no additional costs are required to cast this spell. That means that all it takes to put this spell on the stack is paying 2 generic and 1 black mana. Once the spell is on the stack, each player, starting with the active player, gets priority to respond before the spell resolves. Let's suppose that nobody responds and the spell resolves. Now when the spell is resolving is when you decide which creature to sacrifice. If you do sacrifice your token, the creature dies right now as part of resolution, and you draw 2 as the spell continues resolving. Blood Artist triggers here because a creature died, but triggers created during resolution wait until the spell finishes resolving to go on the stack. After Reactor Raid is fully done resolving and you've drawn your cards, death triggers are put on the stack in AppNap order. Now let's talk about some important takeaways from this and what you can't do in response to spells like this. Keep the distinction of costs and resolution in mind as we go through this. Here's what opponents can't do when you cast these spells. No one can respond to the sacrifice on Reactor Raid. There's no priority during the spell's resolution, but they can act before it resolves. If they wanted to remove both of your creatures and leave you with nothing to sacrifice, they would have to do it while the spell is on the stack. With Village Rites, nobody can respond to you sacrificing your token as an additional cost. By the time Village Rites is on the stack and priority goes around, the token has already been sacrificed. Let's sum it all up. With Village Rites, the sacrifice is an additional cost. You sack before the spell is on the stack, so the creature dies immediately. Your Blood Artist style triggers go on top of Rites and resolve first, and no one can respond to the sacrifice. Even if Rites gets countered, the cost is paid and the creature is still gone. With Reactor Raid, the sacrifice happens on resolution. You cast it first, and then players can respond by countering it, killing creatures, etc. Then if it resolves and you choose to sacrifice a creature, the creature dies during resolution. You draw right then, and only after the spell finishes do those death triggers hit the stack. I want to close with one more quick example to illuminate how resolutions look. Suppose you control Shieldred, and I am your opponent. If I play a Lorien Revealed and draw 3 cards, when does Shieldred's triggers go on the stack? Hopefully it's a bit more intuitive that her 3 triggers go onto the stack once Lorien has resolved and I've drawn my cards. It's not the case that I draw 1 card, resolve a Shieldred trigger, draw another, etc. The act of drawing 3 cards happens simultaneously as part of the spell's resolution. And like we saw with our other examples, the next time priority is checked is when Sheoldred's triggers will go on the stack. Hopefully this has helped clarify the differences between costs and effects that happen on resolution. Alright, that's it for today. This was a more technical video than I expected. You might have to rewind and chew on the ideas for a bit. But I can guarantee that you'll find yourself understanding the game better if you do. If you're ever in doubt, you should always be able to ask your table. But if you don't want to give information away, try to identify whether you're dealing with an additional cost, or if you're dealing with a spell that has to resolve before you get its effect. If you can identify that distinction, you'll be in a great position to handle most interactions. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos on navigating the stack and other distinctions.